The first thing I heard was my daughter screaming my name through a ceiling that should never have carried a child's voice. "Dad, please, I'm here." I was standing beneath a rotting attic hatch in the old Mercer farmhouse, my palm pressed against a wooden door, swollen by years of damp air, and every instinct drilled into me by 15 years in special operations was screaming that something was horribly wrong. There was blood on the floor below the ladder. Not much, just 3 dark drops, almost black beneath the weak yellow bulb. But I knew blood. I knew what fresh blood looked like, what dried blood looked like, and what kind of fear usually accompanied it. My breathing slowed automatically. My pulse did not. "Emily!" I shouted. "I'm here!" Her answer came through the wood, thin and ragged. "Dad, they locked me up here." Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I turned. My brother-in-law, Victor Hale, stood at the end of the hallway holding a fireplace poker in one hand. Beside him were his brothers, Marcus and Dean, both wearing the smug expressions of men who believed they had finally trapped someone who could not fight back. Victor's wife, my late wife's sister Rebecca, stood behind them with her arms folded. "You shouldn't have come back," Victor said. I stared at him for 3 seconds, then I looked at the blood again. "Where is my daughter?" "She's safe," Rebecca answered. Her voice was almost bored. "She's being dramatic." Something inside me went very still. My daughter, Emily Carter, was 12 years old. She had asthma. She hated enclosed spaces. She slept with a small stuffed fox her mother had given her before cancer took her 3 years earlier. She did not become dramatic when she was frightened. She became quiet. That was what terrified me. I stepped toward the attic ladder. Marcus moved to block me. "Don't!" I looked at his shoes. Mud, fresh. The farmhouse had no mud inside unless someone had gone outside recently. His right sleeve had a torn thread. His knuckles were swollen. Victor's poker had a tiny smear of red near the handle. My mind began building the picture before my heart could accept it. "Move," I said. Marcus laughed. "Or what?" I reached into my jacket and removed my phone. I didn't call the police. I didn't call my old unit. I simply placed the phone on the floor and switched it to speaker. A recording began playing. It was Victor's voice from earlier that afternoon. "The trust releases the money when the girl turns 18. Until then, her father has control. If we make him sign over guardianship, we get access." Rebecca's voice followed. "And if he refuses?" Victor had answered. "Then we make him think she's in danger." The recording stopped. Nobody moved. Emily began crying above us. "Dad, please." I looked at Victor. "You locked my daughter in an attic for money." His face changed. Not guilt. Calculation. He finally understood that the quiet man standing in front of him was not the grieving widower they had been manipulating for months. He was looking at a former Delta Force operator who had spent years learning how to recognize danger before danger recognized him. Victor tightened his grip on the poker. "You don't know what you're talking about." I looked at the blood on the floor one more time. Then I looked at the attic door. "No," I said quietly. "You don't know who you're talking to." But there was one thing I still didn't know, and that was why Emily had stopped screaming. My name is Daniel Carter, and before I became a father, I spent most of my adult life being the man other people called when situations had already gone wrong. I had served in the Army and eventually joined a special operations unit where silence was often more important than courage. I learned to enter buildings without being seen, leave them without being remembered, and make decisions while everyone else was still trying to understand what was happening. But when my daughter was born, all of that became secondary. Emily was born during a thunderstorm in October, and the first time I held her, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength. Her mother, Claire, laughed from the hospital bed and said, "Look at him. The toughest man in the world is terrified of a 6-pound baby." She was right. I could walk into hostile territory without shaking, but holding Emily that night made my hands tremble. Claire died when Emily was 9. Cancer took her slowly, cruelly, and without mercy. After the funeral, I promised my daughter that nobody would ever make her feel alone again. I kept that promise by building a quiet life. I left active operations, bought a modest house outside town, coached Emily's soccer team, helped with homework, and learned how to braid hair badly enough that she laughed every time I tried. The Mercer family, however, had never stopped looking at Emily as a number. Claire had inherited a substantial family trust from her grandfather. It wasn't enormous by billionaire standards, but it was enough to make greedy people dangerous. The trust was protected until Emily turned 18, and because I was her legal guardian, I controlled the decisions. Victor hated that. He believed the money should have been divided among Claire's siblings. Rebecca agreed. Marcus and Dean followed whatever promise of cash was placed in front of them. At first they used kindness. They brought Emily gifts. They invited her for weekends. They told her stories about how much her mother loved the family. Then the questions began. Does your dad let you see the trust statements? Does he talk about money? Wouldn't it be easier if you lived with us? Emily told me about those conversations one night while we sat at the kitchen table eating pancakes. I remember looking at her face and realizing she was trying to protect me from worrying. Daddy, she said, Aunt Rebecca keeps asking when I get the money. I put my fork down. What did you tell her? I told her I don't care about it. That answer made my chest hurt. She was 12, and she already understood that adults could turn love into currency. I hired an attorney named Samuel Price to review everything. 2 weeks later, he discovered that Victor had attempted to petition for temporary guardianship, claiming I was emotionally unstable after Claire's death. The accusation was absurd, but the paperwork was real. I confronted Victor. He smiled. It's family business, I answered. My daughter isn't business. He leaned close enough for me to smell whiskey on his breath. Everything has a price, Daniel. I didn't tell him what I knew. I had already noticed strange vehicles near my house. I had already seen Rebecca talking to a man I didn't recognize outside the courthouse, and I had already started documenting everything. Then Emily disappeared after school one Friday. Her teacher told me she had been picked up by a woman claiming to be Rebecca. Rebecca denied it for 20 minutes. Then she admitted Emily had gone with her for a family dinner. When I reached the farmhouse, the doors were locked. My daughter was inside. And someone had decided that the safest place to hide a 12-year-old girl was an attic. I kicked the farmhouse door open before Victor could finish raising the poker. The impact sent splinters across the hallway, and Marcus stumbled backward with a curse. I didn't waste movement. I grabbed his wrist, twisted until the poker dropped, and drove him against the wall hard enough to knock the breath out of him. Dean rushed from the kitchen. I stepped aside, caught his momentum, and sent him sprawling across the floor. Victor froze. Rebecca screamed, "You're insane!" I didn't answer. I was listening. Above me, there was no crying anymore, no movement, no sound except the ticking of an old clock. That silence was worse than the screaming. I found the attic ladder and pulled it down. The wood groaned. I climbed 3 steps and stopped. A thin wire had been stretched across the opening. I stared at it, a crude alarm, not meant to hurt me, meant to warn them that someone was coming. I cut it with the pocket knife I carried out of habit, then I climbed. The attic smelled of dust, insulation, and fear. My flashlight swept across old boxes, broken furniture, and a mattress pushed into the far corner. Emily was sitting against the wall with her knees pulled to her chest. Her wrists weren't tied, but one ankle was secured with a plastic restraint. Her face was pale. There was dried blood near her hairline. My vision narrowed. Emily. She looked at me. For a second, she didn't recognize me. Then she whispered, "Daddy." I crossed the attic in 2 steps and dropped beside her. "I'm here." She grabbed my shirt with both hands. "I knew you'd come." Those words almost broke me. I cut the restraint and checked her breathing. Her asthma inhaler was missing. Her pulse was fast. She had a bruise on her temple and scratches on her arms. "Who did this?" I asked. She looked toward the stairs. "Uncle Victor said they only wanted the papers. Aunt Rebecca said if you signed, they'd let me go. When you didn't come, they locked me up." I closed my eyes for half a second. "How long?" "Since yesterday." Yesterday, my daughter had spent an entire night alone in an attic while I had been searching roads, hospitals, and police stations because Rebecca had told everyone Emily had run away. Then Emily grabbed my sleeve harder. "Daddy, there's something else." I looked at her. "What?" She swallowed. Uncle Victor wasn't alone. Before I could ask another question, the attic window shattered. Glass exploded inward. I pushed Emily flat and covered her with my body as something struck the wall behind us. A bullet. My instincts took over. I dragged Emily behind a support beam and scanned the roofline through the broken window. Nothing. Whoever had fired was gone. But now I understood the larger picture. Victor's family hadn't simply kidnapped my daughter for money. Someone else had been directing them. I carried Emily downstairs. Victor was gone. Marcus was unconscious. Dean was crawling toward the kitchen. Rebecca was nowhere. I checked the front yard. 2 vehicles had disappeared. A third remained. I found a burner phone inside Victor's truck. One message had been received minutes earlier. If Carter arrives, proceed to Phase 2. I read it twice. Phase 2. That phrase was colder than the blood on the floor. I had spent years in places where operations were divided into phases, because every phase had a purpose. Someone had planned this. Someone had studied me. Someone knew exactly where my daughter would be vulnerable, and if Phase 2 had already begun, rescuing Emily was only the beginning. I took Emily to an emergency clinic under a false name, because I didn't know who I could trust yet. Dr. Helen Morris examined her and confirmed she had suffered dehydration, bruising, and a mild concussion. She asked me if I wanted to report the kidnapping immediately. I said yes, but I also told her there was a possibility someone inside the local system was compromised. She studied my face for a long moment. "Daniel, what exactly are you involved in?" "Nothing," I said. "That's the problem." While Emily slept, I sat beside her bed and watched the monitor rise and fall. Every beep reminded me of how close I had come to losing her. I opened the burner phone again. There were only 3 messages, all from the same number. The first instructed Victor to convince me to sign temporary guardianship. The second ordered him to keep Emily hidden. The third had arrived after the attic shooting. Move the father, leave the girl. That was when I knew the plan wasn't about money anymore. It was about removing me. I called Samuel Price, my attorney. He answered on the first ring. "Daniel, I need every document connected to Claire's trust." Silence. Then he said, "I was hoping you wouldn't ask." "Why?" "Because someone accessed the trust file yesterday using credentials that should have been impossible to obtain." My grip tightened around the phone. "Who?" "A federal contractor named Richard Voss." The name meant something. I didn't know why at first. Then memory snapped into place. Richard Voss had worked logistics contracts around military installations years earlier. He wasn't Delta, he wasn't intelligence, but he had access to databases, transport records, security systems, and people who knew how to disappear paperwork. Samuel sent me a photograph. Voss was standing beside Victor at a charity event 6 months earlier. I stared at the image until every detail sharpened. Victor hadn't stumbled into this. He had been recruited, and Voss had recruited him because of me. I called an old teammate, Sergeant Aaron Miller, now retired, and working federal security. I hadn't spoken to him in 11 months. He answered with one sentence. "If you're calling me, something went bad. My daughter was kidnapped." The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. "Tell me where you are." "No, Daniel. I don't know who is listening." Aaron understood immediately. "Then listen to me. Don't move Emily again until you know who has eyes on the clinic." I looked through the blinds. A black sedan had been parked across the street for 20 minutes. "Too late," I said. The sedan's engine turned over. I woke Emily. "We're leaving." She looked frightened. "Again?" "Yes." She reached for her stuffed fox. I had found it in the farmhouse attic. One ear was torn. I had cleaned the blood from it myself. We left through the rear exit. Aaron met us 2 blocks away in an unmarked vehicle. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were exactly the same. He hugged Emily gently. "Your dad's one stubborn man," he told her. She looked up at him. "Are you going to help him?" Aaron glanced at me. "That's what I'm afraid of." We drove to a safe location outside the county. There, Aaron showed me satellite images of the Mercer farmhouse. 2 vehicles had visited before Emily was taken. One belonged to Voss. The other belonged to a private security company. Then Aaron showed me something that made my stomach turn. The security company had been paid through an account connected to Claire's trust. Someone had been stealing money from the trust for months. The kidnapping wasn't the crime, it was the cover-up. Emily wasn't merely the heir, she was the one person who could expose everything once she reached 18. And suddenly, the question wasn't whether my family had betrayed us. The question was how many other people had been bought. The next 48 hours became a chessboard. I couldn't use normal channels because every report we filed seemed to reach Voss within minutes. Aaron contacted one trusted investigator, Detective Lena Ortiz, a veteran investigator with a reputation for refusing political pressure. She arrived at the safe location carrying a folder and an expression that told me she had already seen too much. "I checked Voss," she said. "He's connected to 3 shell companies, 2 missing person cases, and a former county judge. She placed photographs across the table. One showed Victor. Another showed Rebecca. The third showed the man who had been watching the clinic. His name is Caleb Rourke. I recognized him too. Former private contractor, security work, weapons training, no convictions. He's the shooter, I said. Lena nodded. Probably. Emily sat in the next room drawing with colored pencils. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the adults as though trying to understand why grown people suddenly spoke in whispers. I hated that. Children shouldn't learn the language of operational security. They should learn multiplication tables and bad jokes. But danger had forced her into a world she never asked for. That night, she asked me something I will never forget. Daddy, did Mom know they were like this? I sat beside her. No. Are they going to get the money? Not if I can stop them. She looked at me carefully. You used to be a soldier, didn't you? I froze. Claire had told her some things, but never details. Why do you ask? Because Uncle Victor said you were dangerous. I smiled without humor. Your uncle was right about one thing. She waited. I'm dangerous when someone hurts my family. She nodded. But you're safe for me. Always. She hugged me. I held her until she fell asleep. Then I went into the other room. Aaron had traced Voss's communications to a warehouse near the old rail yard. Lena had obtained a warrant, but we didn't know if the warrant would remain secret. I made a decision. We would not wait for Voss to make the next move. We would force him to reveal himself. We leaked a false document stating that Emily had remembered the location of hidden trust records and that federal investigators were preparing to seize the accounts. Within 3 hours, Voss moved. 2 vehicles left the warehouse. One headed toward the courthouse. The other headed directly toward us. The second vehicle was intercepted by Detective Ortiz. Inside were 2 men, forged documents, restraints, and a photograph of Emily sleeping. That photograph had been taken at the safe house. My jaw tightened until it hurt. Someone had found us. The safe location was compromised. I moved Emily again, but this time I did something different. I stopped running. I called Voss directly. He answered after 1 ring. Daniel, you have my attention. I don't want your attention. Then what do you want? Your daughter. My hand tightened around the phone. She's not a bargaining chip. Voss laughed softly. Everything is a bargaining chip. Why Claire's trust? Because you were never supposed to inherit control. Who hired you? He paused. You already know. No. I know Victor is greedy. I know Rebecca is desperate. But you aren't doing this for them. Silence. Then Voss said, your old unit left enemies behind. The line went dead. I looked at Aaron. He knew what that meant. Somebody had reached backward into my military history. Somebody with a reason to believe hurting my daughter would hurt me. And for the first time, Emily wasn't just being targeted because she had money. She was being targeted because she was mine. If you're enjoying this tactical action so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more daily revenge stories, because what happened next was the moment this stopped being a family dispute and became a fight for survival. We returned to the Mercer farmhouse because that was where Voss believed the evidence was hidden. He didn't know we had already recovered the trust records from Samuel's office. We arrived after midnight. Snow had begun falling, covering tire tracks and turning the fields white beneath the moon. Emily remained with Detective Ortiz at a secured location while Aaron and I entered the farmhouse. I moved through each room slowly. The house felt different now. The same walls that had held my daughter captive seemed to hold every lie the family had told. In Victor's office, I found a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside was a ledger, names, payments, dates, judges, police officers, contractors, and one name appeared again and again, Richard Voss. But beneath Voss's name was another name, Harold Mercer, Claire's father, my late father-in-law. I stared at it in disbelief. Harold had died 2 years before Claire. If he had been involved, it meant the corruption went back much farther than I imagined. Aaron turned the page. There were payments made before Claire's death. Daniel, he said quietly, this isn't about stealing the trust. I know. It's about controlling who inherits it. The ledger showed something worse. Claire had discovered irregularities before she became sick. She had planned to report them. 2 weeks before her death, she had signed a sealed statement naming Voss and several family members. That statement had disappeared. I remembered the final conversation Claire and I had before she entered hospice. She had taken my hand and said, "If anything happens, protect Emily from them." At the time, I thought she was talking about grief, about relatives trying to interfere with custody. Now I realized she had known. She had been warning me. I had simply been too devastated to understand. A floorboard creaked behind us. Aaron raised his weapon. "We're not alone." The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the farmhouse. Then a voice came from the hallway. "You should have stayed retired." "Voss!" I heard 3 sets of footsteps. Aaron whispered, "Back door." We moved, but the first shot shattered the window beside me. We returned fire only enough to create distance, then slipped through the kitchen and into the storm. Snow erased our tracks almost instantly. We regrouped near the tree line. Aaron looked at me. "They're hunting us now." "Good." He shook his head. "That's not the answer I wanted." I looked toward the farmhouse. "They took my daughter. They lied about my wife. They tried to steal her future. They brought armed men into my home." My voice was calm, too calm. "I'm done reacting." We built a plan around the ledger. Instead of taking it to the local authorities, Lena contacted federal investigators she trusted personally. The evidence triggered an immediate inquiry. Warrants were prepared, accounts were frozen. But Voss disappeared before they could reach him. Victor disappeared too. Rebecca was arrested at an airport. Marcus was found hiding in a motel. Dean cooperated immediately. He told Lena something that changed everything. Voss had another facility, not the warehouse, a private compound outside the county, and Emily's name was on a list there. The list had a time beside it, 48 hours. I looked at the clock. We had 11. The compound sat beyond a line of pine trees on land officially registered as a hunting preserve. There was a gate, cameras, motion sensors, and enough security to make any normal investigator reconsider entering. I didn't, but this wasn't a one-man assault. I had Aaron, Lena, and a federal tactical team led by Captain Thomas Reed. Reed knew enough about my background to understand why I was there, but he also knew his job. "You stay with my team," he told me. "No improvising." I looked at him, understood. That was the last simple moment of the night. The team breached the outer gate just before dawn. The compound erupted into confusion. Lights snapped on, vehicles moved. Men ran toward defensive positions. We advanced through the perimeter while federal agents secured the buildings. I found Victor first. He was hiding in a storage room, crying, his hands raised. "Daniel, listen to me." I grabbed his collar. "Where is Emily?" "I don't know." Wrong answer. "Voss took her." My blood went cold. "When?" "An hour ago." Victor's face collapsed. He said if we didn't cooperate, he'd kill all of us. I wanted to hate him. I did. But I also needed information. "Where?" Victor pointed toward the main house. "Basement." We moved. The basement was empty except for restraints, documents, and a video screen. The screen turned on automatically. Voss appeared. "Daniel, you always were predictable." The video showed Emily sitting in a chair. Her hands were free. Her face was terrified but intact. Voss stood behind her. "Your daughter has become very important." I stepped toward the screen. "Let her go. Give me the trust authorization." "No. Then she dies." Emily looked directly into the camera. "Daddy, don't." I saw something in her eyes. Not just fear, recognition. She was trying to tell me something without speaking. Her fingers moved once against her knee, twice, then once again. A signal. Claire had taught Emily a simple counting game when she was little. 1-2-1 meant, look carefully. I stared at the video background. A red curtain, a brass lamp, a cracked painting. I knew that room. It was the old Mercer library. Voss had moved her back to the farmhouse. The compound was a decoy. Captain Reed immediately redirected the team. We raced back through the snow. At the farmhouse, the library doors were locked. We broke through, empty, but behind the bookshelf was a concealed staircase. We descended into a basement I had never known existed. There were computers, documents, cameras, and a recording system. Then we heard Emily. "Daddy!" I followed the voice. A door opened. Emily ran into my arms. I dropped to my knees and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I tried to be brave. I kissed the top of her head. "You were brave enough." Behind us, a door slammed. Voss ran. I chased him through the underground passage. We emerged behind the farmhouse into the trees. Snow whipped against my face. Voss turned with a pistol. "Stop!" I stopped. He raised the weapon. For 1 second, everything was silent. I could see the muzzle, I could see his finger, I could see the fear in his eyes. He had spent months believing he controlled the board. Now he realized he had no moves left. "You killed my wife?" I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation was an answer. "She was already dying," he said. Something inside me shattered. Not rage, something colder. I lowered my weapon. "Tell the truth." Federal agents surrounded him from 3 directions. Voss dropped the pistol. He surrendered. And for the first time in years, I let the law take someone away from me. The investigation lasted 11 months. Victor pleaded guilty to kidnapping and conspiracy. Rebecca confessed to financial fraud and obstruction. Marcus and Dean received reduced sentences after cooperating with federal prosecutors. Detective Lena Ortiz testified before a grand jury. Captain Reed submitted the tactical report. Aaron Miller handed over records he had kept hidden for years because he had suspected Voss was involved in something illegal. The sealed statement Claire had written was finally recovered from an encrypted drive in the Mercer Library. It contained everything. She had discovered that her father's business partners were draining family assets through shell companies. Voss had been managing the network. When Claire threatened to expose them, they began isolating her. Her illness was real, but the pressure around her had been deliberate. They wanted her too weak to fight. They wanted me distracted. They wanted Emily controllable. Claire had known the danger and prepared evidence before she died. She had left one final letter for Emily. I read it only after a federal judge released it to me. The letter said, "My sweet Emily, if you're reading this, then life didn't go the way I prayed it would. Never believe that money makes people valuable. People make themselves valuable through what they protect when there is nothing to gain." I cried when I read that. Not the controlled tears of a soldier, real tears, the kind that burn your face and leave your chest aching. Emily read the letter months later. She didn't cry at first. She simply folded it and held it against her heart. Then she asked me, "Did Mom know Daddy would protect me?" I told her. She never doubted it. The trust was eventually placed under an independent fiduciary until Emily turned 18. She didn't ask for $1. She asked for one thing, a scholarship fund in her mother's name for children whose families couldn't afford cancer treatment. That decision destroyed whatever remained of the Mercer family's argument about money. They had treated Emily like an inheritance. Emily chose to turn the inheritance into a legacy. The farmhouse was sold. We never went back. I kept the small stuffed fox from the attic. I repaired the torn ear myself. It sits on Emily's bookshelf now, next to photographs of Claire. I also kept the 3 drops of dried blood from the attic floor in my memory, though I wish I didn't. Sometimes I wake at 3 in the morning and hear Emily screaming my name again. I sit up, I listen. The house is quiet. Then I walk to her bedroom door and see the light beneath it. She is safe. That's enough. 1 year after the arrests, Emily and I visited Claire's grave. Snow covered the ground. Emily placed a small bouquet beside the stone. "I think Mom would be proud," she said. I nodded. She would. Then Emily looked at me. "Daddy? Yeah? Are you still dangerous?" I smiled. "Only when I have to be." She laughed. Then she hugged me. I realized something that day. Revenge had never been the thing I wanted. I wanted my daughter alive. I wanted the truth exposed. I wanted the people who hurt her to face consequences. I wanted Claire's final warning to mean something. And sometimes justice doesn't look like a man walking away from a burning building. Sometimes justice looks like a father sitting beside his daughter at a gravesite, knowing the people who tried to destroy her future failed. They lost everything they chased. She kept everything that mattered. Years later, Emily asked me why I never killed Victor when I had the chance. I told her because there are moments when anger offers you an easy road, and choosing that road can cost you the person you're trying to protect. I told her that being strong doesn't mean doing whatever your pain demands. It means controlling the pain long enough to make the right decision. She thought about that for a while. Then she said, "So you didn't let them turn you into them." That sentence stayed with me. Because she was right. Victor had looked at money and seen power. Voss had looked at fear and seen leverage. Rebecca had looked at family and seen opportunity. They all believed that hurting someone was acceptable if the reward was large enough. But Emily had been locked in an attic and still found a way to think clearly. She had been terrified and still sent me a signal. She had lost her mother and still chose compassion over greed. That was the victory, not the arrests. Not the courtroom, not the tactical operation. Her survival, her character, her refusal to become cruel because cruel people had hurt her. I eventually began teaching security and leadership to young veterans, but I never told stories about Emily without changing details. She deserved privacy. She deserved a normal life. And she built one. She graduated at the top of her class. She studied law because she wanted to understand how systems could be manipulated and how they could be repaired. On her 21st birthday, she stood in front of the scholarship foundation created in Claire's name and announced that the first student had received funding. I watched from the back of the room. She didn't need me to stand beside her anymore. She had become the person I had fought so hard to protect. After the ceremony, she found me outside. "You know what I remember most about the attic?" she asked. "What?" "The sound of your boots on the ladder." I looked away because my eyes were already burning. "I thought I imagined it," she said. "I heard you before I heard you." I hugged her. I was coming. I knew. There are some promises you make once and spend your entire life keeping. That was mine. I had promised Claire I would protect Emily. I had promised Emily she would never be alone. And when the people who wanted her money tried to turn fear into a weapon, they discovered something they never understood. A father's love doesn't make him reckless. It makes him relentless. I never needed to prove I was Delta Force. I never needed a uniform, a medal, or a battlefield to justify what I did. The only thing that mattered was that when my daughter called my name from behind that attic door, I answered. And when the world told her she was just an inheritance, she proved she was a person with a future nobody could steal. If you're watching this and you have ever had to choose between revenge and justice, remember this story. Anger can start the fight, but discipline decides how it ends. So now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Comment on your city or country below. What kind of story do you want next? Military revenge, psychological thriller, or emotional family justice? And here's the question I want you to debate. If you were in my shoes, would you have waited for the police, or would you have locked the doors and taken justice into your own hands? There isn't an easy answer, and that's exactly why I want to hear your reasoning. Until next time, stay strong, protect the people you love, and remember that sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one who has already survived the worst storm. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.
Hello, Karmanox viewer, how are you? I hope you all happy, my viewer and subscriber. Thank you for you like my all stories and comments, good comments. Thanks for all my family. You watching for Karmanox video and subscribe my channel. I am very happy. I glad you. I provide you everyday news story. You watching and enjoy it. I glad. Thanks for watching. My all family and friends, my subscriber, your any comments, any suggestion, you send me mail, I will reply you. You have any personal story, you send me my email, I will create your personal story and upload my channel. Your any other question below the comments. Thanks for watching my video. Goodbye. Peace.